So, hello guys, you're welcome to this live video. I apologize for starting a little behind schedule. Yes, this was supposed to start at 11:45 a.m., but time now is like 11:51 a.m. I sincerely apologize. So, while I await people to join, because of course I know that this is not an absolutely perfect timing. But there's a saying that sometimes you have so many things to say, but time will not permit. And other times, you have so much time, whereas you'll be out of content. But today now seems to be the perfect time for me. And I hope that I won't take too much of your time. I want to make this as snappy as possible. Thank you for joining. Thank you for joining. So while we await others, what we're going to be talking or discussing is basically natural methods of birth control, preventing pregnancy. In my line of practice, I've come across a number of men that don't want their wives to use any medicated or medicinal birth control. They don't want them to use pills. They don't want them to use implants. They don't want them to use anything. They just want to prevent pregnancy naturally. And I believe from experience that it's possible for you to prevent pregnancy naturally. And that's why I'm going to share a few things that can help you because they have actually helped me. So I won't shy away from the fact that medicated or medicinal methods of controlling childbirth are more efficient than these natural methods. They are more efficient, and the barrier method, that's the use of condom, actually prevents the spread of STIs, sexually transmitted diseases or sexually transmitted infections. But let me quickly run through the 18 methods of contraceptive that I have here. There are 18 methods, generally natural or non-natural, let me call it that way. And the first method is implants. So birth control by the use of implants. Implants is just like a needle, or let me say a matchstick. Match is the stick of a match that is, implanted inside the skin. So another method that they usually tell you at the hospital is the use of intrauterine device, IUD, usually either the copper T or the plastic IUD. So either ways, they are effective. Of course, copper T can last up to 10 years. It can last up to 10 years. But some people have worries about infection, recurrent infections while they are on IUDs. They have some people say their husbands complain that there's an obstruction while they're having sex. And that's one thing we want to prevent by the use of a natural method that I'm going to be discussing today. Another method that mostly they tell you at the hospital is shots, injections. Example is Depo-Provera. So they give you injection, it can last up to 3 months, and then after 3 months it lapses, you have to take another one. It's also effective, although it has some adverse effects, undesired adverse effects, including weight gain, which makes so many husbands to want to discourage their wives from going through that route, from adopting that particular method. Another method is the use of a vaginal ring. It's a barrier type of prevention. The vaginal ring will be changed, it also contains hormones that is discharged into the bloodstream from time to time. So it's also an hormonal method of birth control. So we have birth control patch. Patch is like plaster that you put on your skin and it discharges the hormones into your bloodstream. So it's also an hormonal method. That's the 5th method that I'm talking about here. The 6th method is the use of pills, the use of oral medication. And oftentimes you have to use this pill every day. If you skip once, you are in trouble. So you just have this thing. You have to remember to take your pill every day. You have like an obligation to use your drug every day, and sometimes it's not convenient for a woman, and most people don't comply. And that's why you find cases of failure. They say birth control has failed, contraceptive can fail, because if you don't use it as you ought to, you may not get your desired results. So part of birth control pill is also our emergency contraceptive, also known as morning after pill. That's like your post-pill levonorgestrel, your post-pill, your postinol 2. Of course, they can prevent pregnancy, but the efficacy is also low. So if you don't use, the probability is low if you use it in after 3 days of having sex. If you use your post-pill or your postinol 2, the efficiency will drastically reduce. So it's best used within 12 hours of sex. Another method is the use of condom. So we have both male and female condoms. So I've shared in one of my videos that you can actually alternate between the male and the female condom. And by so doing, you would have prevented having unwanted pregnancy. We also have internal condom. I think that's the female condom because it is inserted inside the vagina. It has an elastic, sorry about that. It has an elastic ring that you actually insert inside the vagina. Also, we have the diaphragm. Diaphragm is like a cup. The diaphragm is like a cup that you will insert inside your vagina, and you can actually remove it after having sex. So you can insert it when you're ready to have sex, then you remove it after. We also have birth control sponge. Sponge because it looks like dono, it looks like sponge. So it's also inserted inside the vagina. So it's also like the diaphragm because they are all barrier methods, but they are not effective. All these barrier methods are not so effective except used with spermicidal gels. I'll get to that. So you also have cervical cap. This cervical cap, diaphragm, birth control sponge, they fall under the same category of barrier method. Also, we have a withdrawal method. Withdrawal method is not hormonal and it doesn't involve the use of medication. Also, we have the calendar method. See, these methods, we are gradually, coming down to the methods that we're going to really dwell on today. The natural methods, the withdrawal method, the calendar method. Some people call it safe period. Then the breastfeeding. You can use breastfeeding as a means of birth control. Yes, it can work for you. I'll get to that. Then we have the permanent types, the permanent methods that include tubal ligation and vasectomy. You see, with the global recent economic meltdown or downturn, I believe the least you want to do is to have an unplanned pregnancy. And that's why I've thought of making this video to enlighten you about other means by which you can actually prevent pregnancy and at the same time avoid side effects. And that's the natural method. So did I talk about use of spermicidal gels? They are like creams that kill sperms. So that's another method of preventing pregnancy. So there are all these different methods I listed, they have various efficacies across board. Some are more efficacious than the others. However, the best and the most efficacious is abstinence. So if you abstain from sex, of course, it doesn't fly. It's not an airborne disease. So you won't contract or you won't get pregnant if you avoid sex completely. But if you're married, of course, you cannot avoid sex in your marriage. So how do you space your children? How do you prevent pregnancy when you don't want it? So while I await people to join, while I await people to join, I would like to say that this topic is a very complex one. It's very broad, and it's almost like impossible for me to touch all the aspects, from telling you how these drugs how these contraceptive pills, how these implants and all of them, how they work, their mechanisms of actions, to talk of their side effects, their onset of action, duration of action. So it's a broad topic, and I wouldn't want to go into so much chemistry. But let's just talk as if the people listening to me are laymen. So the natural method involves you as a woman, first of all, to understand your body. You really need to understand yourself as a woman. So if you as a woman, you don't know your menstrual cycle, this natural method may not work for you. Or perhaps you know your menstrual cycle, but it's irregular. It may not necessarily work for you. So this natural method is for people who know their menstrual cycle, who understand how their body works. Because if you don't understand how your body works, this natural method can actually fail you. So if you don't know your menstrual cycle, I'll encourage you to download this app, Spot On. Spot On app. It helps you to, track your menstruation. It helps you track your period, your menstrual cycle, as well as helps you to track your contraception, your pill, whether you are on pill or you're on injections or implants. It will remind you of your next appointment with your doctor or the next time you need to take your dose if you're on pill. So it's a very good app that every woman should actually have on their phone. So you can download it on your Android, and you can also download it on your iPhones. So let me quickly go to natural ways of preventing pregnancy. So the first thing is, I am assuming here that you have a regular menstrual cycle, and it can range from 28 days to 32 days. Even sometimes your menstrual cycle can be 33, 34 days. You are not abnormal. So if you know your menstrual cycle, definitely you will know your ovulation period. Your is that time when you're most fertile, when you're most likely to get pregnant if you have sex. So whatever your menstrual cycle is, just divide it by 2. I'm going to talk like a layman now. Divide it by 2. If you have 28 days as your cycle, that means the 14th day is when you have the highest probability of getting. Starting from the day you start seeing blood, from your first day of menstruation. So the 15th day is when you are most likely to get the 16th day, and so on and so forth. Now, because I said you should divide by 2, does not mean that it's an exact day. No, it's so first thing is to understand your cycle, know when you're most fertile. Now let's consider the window, the fertile window. So there are several researches that have been conducted, but what I would like to say is, let's say 10 days, 5 days before your ovulation time. Now I'm saying the middle, the day you are most likely to get pregnant, that ovulation divided, that cycle divided by 2 now. 5 days before that date to 10 days to 5 days after that date, you're most fertile. So let's assume your cycle is 28 days. So 5 days to the 14th day of your cycle, you're most fertile, you should avoid sex. And 5 days after your cycle, you can avoid sex. I'll also quickly make mention of the safe period. So the safe period, I said 5 days before and 5 days after the middle of your cycle, you should avoid sex. Now let's talk about menstruation. The first day that you start menstruating, you begin to count day 1. That's for your cycle. So the first day of your cycle, excuse me, the first day you start to see blood. So if you menstruate for 3 to 5 days or 7 days, 5 days after your menstruation, to 10 days, let me just say 10 days after your menstruation is considered your safe period. Now, we've talked about when you should avoid sex. You should avoid sex during your ovulation period, which is half your cycle, and 5 days before and 5 days after your cycle. You should avoid sex completely. Now, when should you try sex without being concerned? You should try sex during your safe period, and that is 10 days after your menstruation. So if you menstruate for 3 days, from the 4th day up to the 10th day after, you're free to have sex, and you will not be afraid of getting pregnant. So that's about the safe period. Now let's talk about period preceding your menstruation. Of course, you know that the period preceding your menstruation, the egg is still waiting. The egg has not yet ruptured and is still waiting for fertilization to occur. So I've heard people say, of course, I know I will be on tomorrow. I'll start menstruating tomorrow. So of course, 3 days before, I can still have sex and still feel safe. But if you ask me, I'll say no. I'll say I'll discourage you from practicing such, because your egg is still there at the fallopian tube, waiting to receive something to fertilize it and make it into and make it into a zygote, into a baby. So avoid doing that. So we've talked about when to avoid sex, when to try sex, and also how do you know, what other method can you use to know your ovulation period aside dividing your cycle by 2 and then trying sex between some days? You can know when you're ovulating by checking your basal body temperature. Basal body temperature, it means that from time to time you should know what your body temperature is. But during your ovulation, you just observe that your body temperature is higher than usual, even though you don't feel sick. So during those periods, you can, suspect, you can be suspecting ovulation. Also, we have mucus plug. Do I call it mucus plug now? Ovulation mucus. So if you don't know when you're ovulating using your basal body temperature, of course, you can know when you have discharge that is mucus in nature, that looks like the egg white. You know that during that period, you should avoid sex at all costs. And also, how do you know when you are ovulating? Sometimes for some women, when they are ovulating, they feel horny, like they feel like they should have sex. So during those periods, don't be tempted. Don't be too tempted to say you want to try out sex, because if you don't plan for a baby, you might end up becoming pregnant. So during that period, you should avoid sex completely. When you feel horny, when you have vaginal discharge that is mucus in nature and looks like egg white, you should avoid sex. So if I tell you that there are some natural ways by which you can put some things, prepare concoction and drink the concoction, and it will prevent pregnancy, I will be lying to you. It's a fallacy. I'll be telling you a big fat lie. And that's because no research has been done on such concoctions. So the efficacies have not been guaranteed. So if you find videos or if you find write-ups telling you to put clove inside something and put ginger and put garlic, your case is OYO. You are actually on your own. These are the safe natural methods that I know. Let's go to withdrawal method. Even while you're practicing all these natural methods that I've talked about, the ovulation period, that's the calendar method, you should at least couple it or combine it with the withdrawal method. Although the withdrawal method is solely, the responsibility is solely on your husband. So if he has self-control, of course, you can practice withdrawal method for so many years. But if he's not too careful, you can end up with what you don't want. So you can couple other methods, like after understanding how your body works, after understanding your ovulation, when you should avoid sex, when you should try out sex, you can couple or combine that calendar method with the withdrawal method. And let me quickly check my write-up. Let me check my write-up. Okay. I talked about breastfeeding. Of course, for some women, at this point, I like to talk about individualization. You see, our bodies don't function the same way. We have individual differences. Just like we react to drugs, to food differently, you see, our bodies also react to, or they respond to hormones differently. So for some women, you find out that once they give birth, after 6 weeks, they start menstruating again. And that's a red flag already. It's a sign that birth control through breastfeeding is not for you. So you shouldn't try family planning or birth control because you're breastfeeding. That's because you have already started menstruating. But for some other category of women, after childbirth, it will take them like 1 year or more than 1 year before they start menstruating again. And for those category of women, you can consider breastfeeding a method of birth control for you. Although it's not 100% efficient, but then you are still covered as long as you're not menstruating while you're breastfeeding. And I would advise the first 6 months while you're on exclusive breastfeeding, that you're not menstruating after 6 months, or that you're not menstruating although you are not on exclusive breastfeeding does not guarantee. Actually, nothing is guaranteed as long as you have sex while breastfeeding. But the chances that you will get pregnant while breastfeeding, for those of you who are on exclusive breastfeeding for the first 6 months, the chances are lower than for people who are not on exclusive breastfeeding. So if you're not breastfeeding exclusively, you cannot consider breastfeeding as a means of childbirth control. But if you are on exclusive breastfeeding for the first 6 months, you can still consider yourself safe to try out sex. And you don't have to bother so much about getting pregnant. But if you are not on exclusive breastfeeding, this is not for you at all. Or if you have started menstruating 6 weeks postnatal, post-delivery, don't even try it. So this video is not really to discourage people from going for family planning, but it's just to make life easier for you and to let you know that you can actually not do family planning and still space your childbirth, because most people are afraid of the aftermath of these drugs as to how it can make them infertile in the near future, as to how it can change their hormones, disrupt their hormones, as to a lot of other side effects like bald head, pulling of their hair can begin to, shake off like dust and so on and so forth. So this is all I have for you. And I hope that you've been able to pick 1 or 2 things. So while I wait for people to join, because you're only 1 or 2 people joined, while I wait, if you have any contribution, if you have any preference out of all the methods that I've spoken about, if you have any preference, if you have been practicing any of these natural methods, you can please share with us in the comment section. And if you are yet to decide what method to adopt, of course, you can let us know which method, with everything I have said, which method you would prefer to go for. So, and if you are on family planning and you're experiencing one side effect or the other, you can please share in the comment section for people to see in order to make informed decision, to help them make informed decision. Although there's individualization in medicine, there's individualization in drug usage. So the fact that someone reacted badly to a particular medication does not mean that you are going to react badly to the same medication. So I might not be able to wait for everyone, but if you see this video later on, because I'm going to put it up on my channel, you can do well to contribute in the comment section And remember to subscribe to my channel and hit that notification icon so that you can get notified anytime I make other videos. Thank you so much for your time. Bye.